Hello and welcome to episode 88 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me as ever is Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. How are you doing?
You're not bad, you?
Yeah, getting there very slowly. Before we go anywhere else, let's talk Element Games. So go and buy all your plastic goodness from Element Games. That just did that Wolfsbane. We were roughly right on the price of that one. I picked one up myself.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Finally got a date for moving, so I haven't even opened it yet. Just wanted to pick it up on the reduced price for the pre-release week. So
probably good always trying to think ahead with those things, isn't it? If it's something you think you might want in the future, pick it up early.
Yeah, I definitely want it for the Armigers. There's talk that they won't get 30k rules, which is a bit of a shame, but I'm going to use my Knight Army for 40k anyway. So, and I use the Secretary as thralls, and the majors.
I had the same thought actually when I looked at that box set. I thought, you know what, you could easily get away with that by buying that. You could use a good half of it for 30k, and then just try and find some home for the Necrons. Yeah,
well, you sell your half, you can make your money, a fair amount of money back on that whole set doing that. So it's all good. And there's, we got more and more releases coming. If you're into, fantasy, the Ideneth Deep King look amazing.
They were, it's funny, when they redid Age of Sigmar, I think we spoke about at the time, the models and bits and pieces. The new stuff they've been bringing out for Age of Sigmar makes me want to do Age of Sigmar, and I really am anti-fantasy.
So yeah, it's this is the reason they broke the old world. This is the reason they moved away, and it's taken them a little while to really start to explore. But it does, these. If anyone who doesn't know, these things take 2-3 years to kind of take from concept sketches all the way through for a whole army. And fantasy's got proper epic fantasy. So, you can go and get all your stuff like that from, Element. I've got to put an order in soon for all my, paints ready for the airbrush course, all my little bits and pieces you need. Yep. So, that's coming up in May. So I've got to put an order in.
What have you had to get for that? What have you been?
Nothing. It's
purchasing.
I just need to decide what colours I'm using. Make sure I got the right colours. Make sure I've got enough, cleaner, thinner, that kind of stuff. Just general hobby stuff. But I just need to make sure I've got it ready for that weekend.
It was amazing. On Thursday, because obviously we were recording this on the Easter break, where we had all the bank holidays. I had my friend came over on the Thursday, and we had a hobby night.
All right.
So he's got an air compressor with 2 feeds on it. Cool. So we both cracked out the airbrushes, and he's coming to the London Heresy. So he wanted to get his army done, and I said, look, come over, we'll get the airbrushes out. And I went on the Cult of Paint course.
Yeah.
It felt quite weird because I felt as though I was almost transposing information. I was going, oh yeah, we'll appreciate these, and we'll do this. We'll get the Tamiya out, and he kept looking at me like, what's the Tamiya stuff? And you forget that when you've done a course, that suddenly all the stuff that you've learned that a lot of people may not actually know about. So I was like, yeah, and we'll pin wash, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do this, and then it's amazing how these skills then sort of become embedded into your repertoire.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a couple of guys I know were at Adepticon. One guy particularly was just doing hobby seminars, and so he did he actually did one of Caleb's seminars, and I think he might have done another one on airbrushing, and then a third one. And the third one was ultra different. It was like whack your PSI up to 40 and blast away and do this. Whereas most aren't. And he was learning almost completely separate different theories on, producing different styles, but it's all airbrushing. So that was it. That would be quite interesting to do that, to go and get the whole wide scope of what you can achieve with an airbrush. It gives you a lot of tools.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. It was funny, all the bits and pieces I was pulling out, all the different thinners, all the different sort of the alcohol and all the different cleaning bits and pieces. my mate was sitting there going, "What's that? What's that for? What's that for?" And you forget then with an airbrush there is so much. When you paint with a hairy brush, it's like you've got paint, you've got water, you've got a palette, wet or dry. You don't really have too much to worry about. But then with an airbrush, there's so many other things you can buy and you can get and you can use to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was you achieving much other hobby? How's Corax looking? You're doing your
Corax is pretty much done. I've
Cool.
got just the head left to do on Corax, so I'm going to. I'm funny enough. I was doing a bit of the apothecary, still hating the white on the apothecary, and because my friend came over and he had a few bits and pieces he wanted to get done, and I feel sort of semi that I want to get him motivated to get his stuff done, ready for London Heresy.
Yeah.
So he gave me his Lord Commander, and I said, look, I'll just spend a night and just slap some paint on it for you, like a real quick speed paint job. But it's almost a bit of a palette cleanser, a bit of a break from the higher end stuff. So I've literally spent a couple of hours and pretty much done 90% of this Lord Commander. So I've just sort of very quickly gone over in the colour scheme and picked details and bits and pieces. And I've got the head left to do and an arm. So that's what I'm going to be doing tonight. Just going to sit there and just sort of, it's quite therapeutic to do something that's a little bit less taxing. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit less, less pressure to sort of make everything perfect. You can do a bit and think, no, that'll do on that. I don't have to spend any more time making sure I've picked out every detail. That part will do. I'll move on to the next bit.
Yeah, that's cool. It's got to be done every now and then.
I mean, that's, so and also it helps move him along to the London Heresy. So that's another sort of, it's a double win really. So another painted army would be a good thing. How about you? Have you been up to much with the house move and all the other bits and pieces?
Yeah, just trying to get my Age of Sigmar done for May before, I kind of accepted that I'm just going to do brushwork now. We're going to have to start packing stuff up in a week, so, a little less than a week, but, we need to get ready for the move because we finally got a date for that. So move into the new place, then get it all back out again, and we'll have lots of stuff to do when we do that. So I'm aware that my hobby might not be quite as easy to get to the table for a couple of weeks.
Does moving house count towards your 365 challenge?
It should do, but it doesn't, unfortunately. Luckily, we don't have to do much with the house when we get in, so that aspect of it. The garden needs some work, and there's always stuff, isn't there? There's always things.
Oh, yeah.
But it's all good. So I'm just trying to crack on with the Stormcast, so I can get that sorted and ready. But and Durham at the weekend as well. So that took up time. The traditional Friday trip to Warhammer World. A good sit down. I saw Rob Symes in there playing some. What was he playing? 40k. That's what he was playing. I'm trying to remember. It's good to catch up with people again. A lot of the people I normally catch up with were at Depticon. But it's good to see those guys. So plugging away, I think is the term.
Oh, good.
Absolutely.
Good. Sounds like you had a fun time of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good fun. We'll go more into Durham in a little bit. Should we talk about what's been going on? What very little has been going on?
Not a huge amount.
No, so Valdor's now out.
Yes.
Whether you like the model or not, the pre-order's over. He's out. So it's an announcement of something we already knew an exact date of. Slightly underwhelming. And this seems even slower than any other time we've had in the Heresy for a while.
Yep. I mean, the Termite was available at Adepticon, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So that should be coming soon. So, if a few guys at Adepticon, I see Dave Sampson got his painted up in the room that night so he could use it on the table over the weekend, which is quite cool. But in terms of what's actually available generally, a model that had already had a pre-order date. It's a bit disappointing. Kind of have heard some little things that Forge World maybe not, the first quarter may not be as lucrative as they would normally hope. I can completely understand if that's true. I can completely understand why, because we haven't seen a huge amount. and it's
what you mean, as in regards to financials versus what they've been putting out?
as in sales, as in sales. Yeah, they haven't been selling a huge amount.
Well, I mean, I do think a lot of their sales probably does revolve around events and the new stuff coming out. You know, if the new stuff comes out, it must push their
new stuff coming out. The events are set. I think at the Heresy weekend, they would have sold a lot of stuff. I think if you're not, putting out new interesting models, books, things like that drive forwards, then you will slow down. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to continue. I'm sure we're going to see lots of stuff. We've had, Lord of the Rings taking up some time. There's been some Necromunda releases, Blood Bowl releases, that kind of thing, or certainly announcements. Some cool stuff, but the Heresy does seem to be bobbling along at the moment, which is a bit of it's a bit of a frustration. But we deal with that in other ways. We look at your focus turns to things like events or Black Library trying to do that, I suppose. But as a game system, it's treading water maybe. But what can you do? Hopefully they'll get back on it, and we'll start to see. And I'm sure, it's not having a go at Forge World. It's pointing something out, but I'm sure there's still a lot of hangover from 40k, and everything else, trying to keep up with all that going on.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
We got told about, Chocolate Marines, today.
Good old April Fools. Yeah.
Yep.
And
I was waiting for it. I was searching the website and the internet trying to find when it was going to appear, then I saw it on Facebook.
Yeah, they always do one. I like the fact that they opened up the display halls for really cheap over the Easter weekend, and then had a few Easter eggs, literal eggs, dotted around, including a World Eater's Contemptor egg. And things like that.
That's the only one I saw online, actually.
I've seen a few others. There's a few in the 40k board, big bloodletter egg and things like that, which is a bit of fun. But also having that open over the weekend for £1 is really good.
Definitely. I mean, especially if you're. I mean, on Easter, a lot of people travel, so if you're up that way, and then you think, well, for a quid, pop in a little look. It's not. Doesn't seem like a big expense then.
No, absolutely, yeah, and take the whole family in. And have a look around it, which is really cool. There was other big news actually from Humble. So, for those who don't know, Humble bundles they collect things, books, games, and all this, and a certain amount of money goes to charity for what you pay. But there's a minimum price, but you can pay as much as you want beyond that. And they've got a Black Library bundle on there at the moment. I don't know if you saw this.
No, I didn't.
It's got, so it's running to about the 10th, I think, of April. So there's a $1 or more bundle. That level is the Path of the Warrior. So 40k books, Path of the Warrior, Nightbringer, Baneblade, Hellion Reign, and that's that. And then, Gates of Azir from Age of Sigmar, Pantheon, Trollslayer from the Old World. There's a series sampler, and then there's 66% off Total War Warhammer, the original, and 75% off Battlefleet Gothic Armada. So all of that for $1 or more. Going up to $8, you get all that previous plus Salamander, Ravenwing, Priests of Mars, Astra Militarum, Scions of Elysia, Argent, for 40k, Warstorm and Road of Blades for Age of Sigmar. Then 70% off Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, 10% off Inquisitor, Martyr, and 60% off Space Hulk Deathwing. And then $15 or more, you get Reboot Guilliman, Lord of Ultramar, the Primarch book. For 30k, you get the Painted Count as well. And then 40k, what we got here? I Am Slaughter, Ragnar Blackmane, Cal Jericho, Age of Sigmar. We get Return of the Gash, Bear Eater, and Thinking of the Black Sun. And then there's a few more games. So 50% off Warhammer 40k Sanctus Reach, 40% off Warhammer 40k Space Wolf, games I'm assuming. And there's exclusive content and wallpapers as well. So if you are into the background, then they're certainly worth the value if you haven't read some of that. So so that first one, lots of people talk very highly of Baneblade by Guy Haley. So at the very least, if you just get that and you haven't read that, then that's good. I've read Path of the Warrior, I enjoyed, and Troll Slayer is a classic. Yes, and to be honest, if you're going to buy Total War Warhammer, 66% off that as well, or Battlefleet Gothic. And then the second one as well, Ravenwing, Priest of Mars is good by Gav Thorpe. Ravenwing's Gav Thorpe. Priest of Mars by Graham McNeil is pretty good as well. So there's a bit of value in that. So that's really interesting.
So are they ebooks, I take it? Is that how
I would assume so. All digital downloads, I would have thought. So I've never actually purchased any of the Humble Bundles yet. But I'm assuming, it'll be all digital. It comes to support many formats. I think some of them are audios as well. So there's some audio pieces in there. I'm trying to remember exactly which one's which. I'm extremely tired tonight, so my brain's not really working very well. So I do apologise to everyone for that. But yeah, that's pretty cool, I thought.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been about it, really. I think it's been quite quiet. There's been, obviously we've had Adepticon and Durham going on. Obviously I wasn't at Adepticon. Sure, Radio Free fan, people like that will be talking about it. There was some controversy I'm not even going to get into at this stage because it just seems, a bit blown out of proportion. Based on our weekend away, I think I will try and get, there's a couple of guys I want to try and get on to talk about events and list writing and things like that because it's an interesting topic at the moment, and there's lots to discuss. But
I was just sitting there racking my brain trying to work out what you were talking about, and I think I just did.
What do you mean about the Adepticon?
Well, I'm going to say one word. Is it Warhound?
Yeah. Okay. So for those who don't know, there was a list with a Warhound sat on a Sky Shield platform with
3 Void
Shield generators, and some rapiers were also on the thing. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't know the details. I've heard bits and pieces about that. I believe it was part of a tournament event, and I feel strongly that if you're running an event and you don't want to see something like that, then you have to make sure that the pack doesn't allow something like that. Because at the end of the day...
and the word tournament there is your big clue.
Because if you're playing in a tournament, then you shouldn't be... You shouldn't be kind of looked down upon for trying to win. Because it's a tournament. So there's a little bit on both sides. And don't get me wrong, the Warhound had no gun arms at various points. But I don't know...
very resin grey as well.
I don't know the ins and outs. I don't know the details, but... fundamentally, that's something that I want to talk about as well. Packs should set expectations, and we also shouldn't be looking down on people for playing within the way we let people play. I don't know the guy. He might have been an absolute gent and got all the sports votes. I don't think he did, but that doesn't necessarily, if he comes in, he's a great guy and he plays in the right way, then. That's fundamentally different from someone coming along and being a pain and obtuse and causing problems in a desire to win. To me, that's the bigger issue. Whether a player does that, and I don't know. I haven't heard anything about this guy as a person. I've only heard about an army. So, but it's something I want to talk to a few guys with at some point in the future. But I think we're just about done for the start of the show. Cool. So let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about Durham. So last weekend, I headed up to Durham with a few guys from the club. A long drive up the M1. As I said earlier, we stopped off at Warhammer World, which was cool, and then arrived in Durham, I don't know, 9:30 on the Friday night, to talk into the early hours of the morning, and then get ready to play some games. Now, if you want to hear other kind of sides of what went on and other descriptions, other podcasts were there. You know, if you listen to Geno 5.2 or Legion of Lies or various others, I'm not going to name them all. There was a few there. Then that's cool. So I think we had 5 of us come up from our area of the world and play some Heresy. So this is the famous
Cool.
Heresy camp, the original,
Yes.
the OG.
Yes, it's funny because I think, did you post some pictures up online?
Only a
Of
couple.
It, someone else. Because obviously I've painted a picture in my mind of what this hobby camp, Heresy camp looks like, and it was very different to what I thought it was going to look like.
Yeah, so this all takes place in one building. There's a hall with some stairs at one end that lead up to some quarters. There's bunk beds in these rooms. You know, putting some big guys on. Dan and I were sharing a room, and neither of us is small. The bunk bed was making some creaky noises as you get on it.
Were you testing it out for
just for
load
sleep?
bearing?
Just easing yourself onto it. No, it's good. You know, bring your own either duvet or sleeping bag, and the girls come in and cook food, which is great, and everything. You don't have to leave that building all weekend. Now, it's a few miles away from a large Tesco's, so we made a couple of trips up there to get snacks, bits and pieces. I'm not always the easiest to provide for food-wise, so I was quite aware that pop up there and grab some bits and pieces for some of the meals that I wasn't necessarily a fan of. But yeah, everything can be self-contained. Last year we went
does
for.
Sound very cool, actually. I mean, the sort of it sounds like you're locking it's a bit like Weekender where you're going somewhere
Absolutely, yeah.
and you're going to spend a weekend locked away and you are in the hobby world surrounded by people that, you know, you're going to get to know quite intimately by the end of it, by the sounds of it. It does sound quite exciting, I must admit. I did think to myself, if I went to another event, I quite fancied the sound of that, I must admit.
Not quite the same luxury as the Weekender, I must admit. But so yeah, you know, a group of people who've all got similar interests or the same interests, being in one place. And Michael and Graham and Chris, they do a good job of things like trying to make sure the people sharing the rooms are, you know, all get on and do things like that. So you kind of request and they balance the rooms out amongst, you know, the different groups that are going, and then provide a Warhammer tournament as well, and all for the kingly sum of, I think it was £60. Might have been more.
It's not bad, is it? It's pretty good value. I mean, is that including your food as well?
I'm trying to remember if it was 80 now. It's been that long ago since I paid for it. It might have been 60. Yeah, food, board, gaming, everything. All in.
You see, I mean, that's where, I mean, I think the expense comes from going on these weekends away. I usually find it's the hotel, it's the eating. They're the things that you end up coming away going, blimey, I've spent, I've done like 150, 200 quid this weekend just on, like, food and drink and bits and pieces. When you're throwing in that element into the mix, then suddenly you think, well, actually, that's good value. You're getting a steal, aren't you, really? It's saving you a fortune.
Yeah, 30 quid's worth of fuel to get up there and back. And away you go. That's a very, very cost-effective weekend. The only issue is for us on the south coast, it's a fair drive. Which
sure.
I was so tired. That Monday morning at work, getting up at 6 o'clock for work the next day, meant that, I was good for pretty much nothing, for the first half of that Monday morning.
You do nothing at work, isn't it, really?
That's, I resemble that comment. It's a long drive back home, but I know it's not the same as other long drives, but the fact is, you have that long weekend, you have a distinct lack of sleep due to going to bed very late.
Was there lots of late night chats and drinking or that sort of stuff?
Yeah, everything you'd expect. They ordered these Parmos on Saturday night. For people who don't know, that's a chicken-based pizza, basically. So remove the bread, the dough, put chicken in. They ordered, I don't know how many people were on that order. It was 20 odd. And it took over 2 hours for it to arrive. So it arrived after midnight, after some people had gone to bed. So someone got back up out of bed to go and eat it. The first night, I think 3:30 went to bed. The only problem I have with the accommodation, and it's a minor thing, because there is one room that's near a power point in the hallway. There are no power points in the rooms.
That is an issue, isn't it, when you think about everyone with their smartphones?
That's not so much of an issue, because you can charge it all downstairs all day, because you've got power.
Or charged during the day and then...
Yeah, the building's got power in it. However, I've got a sleeping machine, for my sleep apnea, and, when I don't use it, it can result in a less than restful sleep. So that was all playing into it as well.
For you or for the person that you were sleeping with?
I think Dan was snoring before I got into bed that first night for sure. That's all right, so it's all good. It's all gravy. I mean, even as we were creeping into bed, I don't know who's next to us, but there was some snoring coming from there as well. That's fine. It's all part of the fun.
There must be a lot of snoring that goes on in those in those rooms, I would have thought.
Especially when the drink's been consumed.
Oh yes, yeah, definitely, yeah. Few drinks, everyone gets a bit snoring.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the venue, that's the setup, which is really good at the end of the day. You're not, as I say, for what you're. Sometimes it's great to go to a big city, get a nice hotel, have that city environment around you to go out, and sometimes it's nice to be locked away and just to be thinking. And I want, when I plan events, or when I'm planning which events I'm going to, if it was all one way or the other, it wouldn't be as good, and I would look for events that do other things for sure.
Sure.
I really miss I haven't had a night out in Cardiff since my second event there. So it's been a while. It feels like it's been ages. It's probably only a year. But
Cardiff is a good night out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're coming up to 2 years, I suppose, now. I haven't even been to any Age of Sigmar events or anything, which I've used to do. So it's like itching to get back out and do one of those kind of events as well, where we all then go dancing, till the late hours, and have a laugh. But, Durham is one of those enclosed events, and that's cool. Company of Legends, as I should call it, as the official title, run by the Edge of Empire guys, just to make sure that's clear. So Graham and Michael and Chris run the Edge of Empire podcast. And
so, how was their actual event organised then? Because I think I've had a few people say that they have a good event pack, but they allow they're a little bit more lenient on unpainted armies and list building, etc.
I don't know if they were lenient on unpainted armies. There's always a mix of armies at any event. And, a couple of guys were still painting on the Friday night, kind of classic. There were some good armies there as well. In terms of how powerful the armies were, they were turning anything away or asking people to change anything that was too over the top. There were a couple of armies that potentially could have stood out that way. Joe from our club, he bought a Warhound with 6 Arvus Lighters with troops in, and then some artillery as well, which has when you look at it written down, it looks very, very good. Within the game itself, it's less powerful than it looks, but it's still good. And that showed over the weekend. We'll go into that a little bit, but that was one where they were looking at, do we say no? Do we say change it? In the end, they just put special rules in play, making sure all of his artillery scattered. So he was rolling 3d6, remove the lowest for scatter, for all his bombs.
Oh, okay, yep.
barrage weapons, which, helps a
It was
little bit.
always a little bit inaccurate and wasn't sort of pounding people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for most of the event, his Warhound couldn't regain its shields. So there's a couple of little things in play there to help tone it down a little bit. But we had, there were 2 lists that were Magnus, and in this we could bring up to 2 lists. So I'd written 2 lists out. Joe, I think, had just kind of gone, no, I'm just going to bring the one. But there were 2 lists or 2 players who could bring Magnus. Court of the Crimson King on one of them, which again has the potential to be, a strong list, or at least a list that can be a negative play experience for the opponent.
Yes.
But again, the players there weren't necessarily taking the choicest, the juiciest of all the choices, should I say? They were maybe mixing their psychic powers up a little bit, things like that. But again,
it always does depend on who you're playing. You can see a list and go, that's completely unfair. I don't want to play that. That's going to ruin my day. I don't want to play you. But it's the player that you're playing, and if they're playing it in a particular way or in a friendlier manner, then it doesn't. I've so many lists you can see that probably are really, really good in the right hands, and some lists maybe may look fantastic, but in the right hands they're not as powerful. They can be toned down and.
Yeah, and
is the player,
and they also highlighted a few armies. So their whole system was the loyalists and traitors are split up, and we actually had a map based kind of hex system using the old tiles from Mighty Empires. And as the campaign weekend went on, we had more and more options, but there were things like fortifications. I'm trying to remember exactly what they were called now, but basically there were sites on each of these tiles, or a lot of them had sites where gaining control of 3 of bastions allowed a special rule to be in play. Gaining control of 3 radar places gave like reserve manipulation, things like that. And each loyalist and traitor side had to decide who was attacking and who was defending, and the attackers would choose which of those hexes they were attacking. So there's a bit of strategy in trying to work out where to attack, how many people to attack with, that kind of thing. And then obviously the 8 defenders then would just be lined up to defend them. They would, say I want to defend here or specifically. And then the major power lists, or the list deemed to be at the top, were like known attackers, so people could volunteer to play them. So another way again of either you could choose then either someone who has a chance to beat them or just doesn't mind playing them. So again, you mitigate the issue of having those lists in your event. So
you did something similar, I recall, in the what was the one in
Attack and Raver, yeah. Yep.
You did something similar on that, I believe. You sort of said, right, these are the tough lists. You choose who fights those lists, do everything else randomly, sort of thing. So, like you said, it sort of tones down those a bit because people know that what they're going up against. They're not sort of walking to the table with their toys and going, oh, I'm playing this list, am I? Great.
Yeah, and some people like the challenge. Some people just want to play those kind of lists because they don't play them very often. And some people believe that they can just handle them. So again, we'll get into that in the wrap up, I think, but it's not always about making a fair game, in that respect. So yeah, as the campaign went on, more and more of these sites opened up. So after the first campaign round, say the traitors control 2 bastions. In the third round, you can either choose to attack those bastions you don't control in that original zone, or attack new hexes in the next zone. So,
right.
So say you only controlled, say the loyalists were like, well, we definitely don't want them getting all their bastions. We'll actually attack one of the ones they hold, because if we lose, then they've already hold it. So there's a little bit of tactics going on there. And then there was, in the third round, there was a hive which could count as whichever one you wanted it to. So it's a bit of strategy going in that, and there was an obvious advantage to having a spread of control which could help your armies moving forwards, but not so much that you couldn't recover from it, which is good.
Yes.
And I don't think, from what I believe, I'm just trying to double check, that didn't, so those holding of those territories didn't actually decide the event. They gave you bonuses, but the event was done on wins. Whether it was the last round or whether it was total as you go through. I'm not 100% sure. I can't quite remember. But we get one of the guys come out, read the information. There were two perspectives of what was going on. They had a traitor and a loyalist perspective being read out, and I'm not going to go into that because they're actually
that's
running.
story-based?
Yeah, story-based,
sort of like...
and that's all coming into play in September. So I'm not going to go into that.
Okay,
because they're
like the second part.
Yeah,
Is that for the second?
Yeah, well, they're rerunning the same thing, I believe. Because
right,
of the popularity of the ticket sales, they decided. Yeah, they were talking about expanding, going to a different venue, but I know certainly my feedback and a couple of other people's feedback was no, don't. You've got this thing and it works, and if you move to something else, it's not this thing anymore. It's a different thing, and that's fine.
Oh, yeah,
but we have the different thing. Do what you do well. So they're running a second one. So yeah, it was a really good system. It was improved upon from last year, where we were separated, but we didn't really feel like there was any connection between the things we were doing and what was actually happening. And that's easy to happen. I don't criticise the guys for doing that. They put a lot of effort into this campaign. Graham, the guys in general, had written basically every possible outcome out. So all the stories were ready to go. So, they were very prepared. Yeah. And they were, a lot, having done something similar, a lot of your work gets wasted because at the end of the day, you can only have 5 scenarios that occur. But it means that you're prepared for whatever happens, which is cool. And so I like that. And then we played games, there were, the scenery was good. They've done some time kind of preparing that. Some tables better than others. I think that's always going to be the case.
So is that new tables that they've sort of done for this event? Was it developing?
I think
what they
it's a combination of what they had and what clubs have had and building it on that. They do have, I will say, so they tried to put mats down where they can. There was 1 or 2 tables where there was no boards. It was 2 tables next to each other, and you get the old dreaded drop or chasm in the middle of the table as it goes between 2 tables. Yeah. Which it wasn't a major issue, but I think moving on, if they generate some cash from this, maybe some toppers, even if it's just a bit of MDF on top, just to level those out would be really cool. And just help. But I didn't have any of those issues myself. And we had, so let me think, 16 players aside. I think it was 32 players, which is good. Nice, healthy round number there. And we should probably, they were streaming. So if you go to Edge of Empire Facebook page, you can find they streamed 1 game from each round, and had a little, stream with the players mic'd up. So you can go in here. And Tom from Geno52 was on there at one point with Justin Hill, the author from Black Library. I didn't get on there. So you're all saved having to listen to me or watch me play. Which is probably a very good thing.
Were you listening to the players as they were actually doing all their?
Yep, as they chat, as they shout abuse at each other, so all that kind of stuff. They are literally just mic'd up the whole time, which means you don't need a commentary crew there. They can just be left to get on with it. So they're doing what they can. At the end of the day, if they had a crew there, it would involve a lot more people. So that's quite cool. But that was good. I know some people were keen to play on that, so I like that. I think that's a nice option to have.
It does sound quite cool actually, because if you you can't make it, if you want to see what's going on, it's good to be honest. Or if you're thinking about going to the next year or the next event, you can have a quick check it out and see what it's like. Yeah.
And then one thing I'll say, so I'm not going to get too much into the overall narrative of the event or what we did, because I don't know how much that would give away. I think what I've already said, is what people learn on the Friday before you have like a briefing when you turn up, just of how things work. So we got paired up, and I got a random opponent in the first one. I was playing against some Alpha Legion. I didn't write any of the names down. How terrible was that? But the guys playing.
You never remember names.
No, I should probably have prepared, and again, I do apologise for that. But this guy was playing pretty much all infantry Alpha Legion with Omegon. He was using Omegon, and he had 2 Contemptors in his list. And I was using my Mechanicum, and this was my first list, which was, let me think, it was basically 3 units of Thalax with Photon thrusters.
Okay, yep.
We had, let me try, 3 Castellax, just one with a multi-melter, standard Castellax, 1 Castellax by himself with a Darkfire Lance, 6 Ursarax with, 4 Power Fists in there. Using my Knight Errant Librarian, who would hang around with them as well. And then we had, what else did we have in that? We had some Vorax sneaking forwards, a Thanatar, and a little, just a Magos to accompany the Castellax, and we had an Archmagus Prime with all the toys, my Ordinator, the kind of one I stick to, because I don't bring any tanks in this kind of list. 20 Tech Thralls, and 5 Myrmidon Destructors with irradiation engines. So yeah, no armour at all in this list. And I kind of did that on purpose. Kind of like it. It's a bit different. Sometimes it confuses people. It can. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was to say, yeah, if you do when people get so used to seeing tanks, when you see a big troop army, it's something like, how do I deal with this?
Yeah, and the thing with Mechanicum as well is, everything's, most things in the army are toughness 5, so a las cannon's not instant killing them, and in fact you'll feel no pains against them as well. So it does play a little bit against kind of those big tank lists. The reverse of that is I don't necessarily have enough quality armor piercing shots, particularly at range. So I rely on the Ursarax to do a job, and they don't always get to the enemy in contact to be able to do that. Now, I feel, I do want to talk about, as I've said before, I want to talk about this at some point with a couple of guys on here to talk about the difference in play styles. This guy was a thoroughly nice chap. We had an absolutely cracking game. It was good fun. We actually carried on beyond, the end of turn 6 just because Alfarius was trying to kill stuff, or Omegon, should I say. And we were like, how long can he last and what can he kill? Because unfortunately the game was pretty much over turn 2. His Alpha Legion infiltrated and set up, in a lovely kind of wide circle around me, and moved towards me on his first turn. I mean, I got the first turn, and it's one of those games where like the Vorax kill 8 out of 20 Space Marines, and that doesn't normally happen with shooting. He's got like a big squad of missile launchers at the back of the board. I'm like, actually, against some of my robots, they could be quite useful. And my Ordinator dropped, 2 templates on them and killed all but 2. And then I was just picking off his armor saves weren't much, and then second turn, like irradiation engines were in range and things like that. And the game as a contest was over, but we played out the game, and we had good fun and it was cool. Really enjoyed playing the guy, but it was almost one of those games where my opponent was like, well, this is how I play my army, and I want to play my army this way, and that's cool. Right? Because that's what the Alpha Legion do, and that's fine. And unfortunately, in this circumstance, that meant you were probably going to lose. Now, there were things he could do. Omegon's unit got the big unit of breachers, and they got killed to a man before he could come out, which means he goes into reserve. So, you can't do that. And on reflection, if first turn he just charged Omegon out by himself, actually, I kind of got to deal with him. Or if I don't, he's then going to rinse a squad a turn kind of job. so options, and that becomes a feature of those kind of games. And I had a couple of them through the event, but it was really fun. But I was like, oh, okay, the army works. I mean, he did things like I got the positioning wrong on my knight errant, and the two missile launchers, one of them took my knight errant out. Just like, bang. Oh, he hasn't done anything yet. Okay. That kind of stuff. Luckily, I didn't need him alive for his Oath of Moment to work, so that was alright. But, yeah, it was, Castellaks are great at dealing with troops. Irradiation engines just deal with anything that comes into range of them. The weakness of this list was they can't move up the table very well, but they didn't have to because he started so close to me anyway.
Yeah.
So
they played into that quite neatly for you, really.
Yeah. So it was, it was a big win. And it was, as I say, it was a fun game, and that's the important bit. I don't mind win and lose. We had fun. I believe my opponent had fun. He had a big smile on his face for the event and for the 5, 6, 7 turns we played with just seeing how much Omegon could kill. That was really cool. And as I say, I don't really want to get into like our whole side winning, but I don't think the Loyalists did that great in the first round of games. And the second round of games, I got to play a Thousand Suns player. And this was, I can't even remember the mission, mainly because it didn't come into play. And this happened for 3 of the games. So Magnus, Arcus missile launcher, with the instant kill, missiles on it that are just deadly to Mechanicum. We had Land Raider, with the Blades guys, the Kentai Blades guys, who could put out some damage in combat, and 2 small units of Scarab Terminators, the Thousand Suns Psychic Castellaks, a unit of 3 of them, which are pretty cool, which are way better than mine. And there was a few other bits and pieces dotted around. And I was going first in this game, unless he could seize. So my opponent made the decision to leave Magnus and the Arcus off the table. And initially I thought, oh yeah, that's quite tricky actually. That's quite a good move. I probably would have done something similar if I'd thought about it maybe. They can come on and he can just like rinse my Castellaks with his Arcus, and then Magnus can come on where he needs to come on and just kill something. And all the time I'm going to have the Scarab Terminators and the Castellaks causing me problems. So in this list, actually, before we kind of set up, I decided to use my second list. So this was a little bit different from my first list. Otherwise, what's the point? So the Archmagus Prime was the same. We had the Magus Dominus. We had 3 units of Thalax, 3 Castellaks, the Castellaks with a Darkfire Cannon, the 20 Tech Thralls, but then the 6 Ursarax, but I didn't have the Knight Errant character in it. I had the Thanatar Automata. I had 5 Myrmidons with Photon Thrusters. So this army has 8 Photon Thrusters, 1 Darkfire Lance, which works pretty much the same, but it's 1 strength higher. And actually the Ordinator's got 1 as well. So there's a lot of AP2 coming out, a lot of shots.
Yep.
And then I added in a Knight Atropos, just because I haven't used one for a long, long time. And it's a cool model, and it's good, but it's expensive, and it's 1 knight. So I actually thought what I'm doing here is giving people a target for their heavy weapons now. So I actually thought it might be a detriment to the army to do it, but I want to use it. I should also say, I actually forgot, I left my 20 thralls at home, so I didn't get to use them, and they were in both my lists. So every game I was playing, it's only 120 points or something, but usually they save my warlord from getting shot. But schoolboy error, always check your models, that you've got every single one before you leave for an event. Yeah, whatever, I'm cool.
I know some people that turn up to Golden Demon and they've forgotten to pack their demon entry.
Sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, everything's there, I'm off. I had a quick look around to see if I could borrow some models, but I thought, you know what, actually, they won't look the same. They won't look right. You know what? Stuff it. I'll play without them. But in this game, I knew I was going first. I set up fairly aggressively. It's just like, well, if he gets first turn, he gets first turn. You know, if he steals the initiative, that's just, it happens. Not a lot you can do about it, is there, sometimes? So I thought, set up aggressively and just push forwards. And I've got, as I said, I've got like best part of 20 AP2 shots from 48-inch range from photon thrusters. It's just like, well, I'll just pound the Scarab Terminators. You know, even if they've got a 3-up invulnerable, they're going to lose some eventually. And we'll deal with the tank with the Atropos, hopefully. And essentially that's what I did. One Scarab Terminator unit fled turn 1. I think I blinded one unit because the photon thrusters have blind, which is just a brilliant rule. And I did okay that first turn, but I was like, yeah, okay. Atropos was well up the table. No worries. And his turn, he kind of advanced towards me. I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. You know, if he can cause some pain, then fair enough. But he didn't have enough on the board without Magnus, and he was relying on those, the Land Raider with the troops in is a lot of points. And Mechanicum's maybe not the best army for it to be up against. And
oh right, yep.
You know, he didn't do a huge amount, but did enough to make me think, okay, right, I need to deal with the Caslax because they're a problem because they can get really good. And some of his psychic powers were doing little bits and pieces here and there, and I'm like, okay, Magnus isn't down yet, you know. I won't sweat this. What's going on now? Let you have that. I just hope that nothing's too great, but he was getting off some good stuff. Unfortunately, it meant turn 2. My Knight Atropos was well in range to charge his well in range to move up and shoot his Land Raider and charge the unit that now can't hurt him. So that was like, yeah, exactly. And that's like a shed load of points. The second unit of Terminators broke and fled. The first unit, I don't think they rallied either. So all of a sudden, like, that's 2 units of, because I'm putting enough wounds on them.
They're expensive as well. If they're running away, that's the last thing you want them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and yeah, you get a bit lucky for that to happen, but, I was putting a lot of shots into them. I was actually killing them as well. So, even if they didn't flee, there were only a couple in that last unit. He had some snipers. I was knocking them down and actually charged my Caslax into his Caslax. And Caslax are only ever good on the charge, and I didn't do anything, and he didn't do anything back. And I'm like, you know what? I'm really happy that they're just tying each other up now.
Yes.
That's like, they are going to
trading blows constantly.
They are just going to slap each other for a long time. And probably, maybe one of those units comes out at the end of it. Probably his, because they're better than mine, as I said. But that's fine.
What do they do that is better?
Well, psychic powers, higher initiative for start, which is a big one. So higher initiative. Okay. So yeah, if they can kill one of my models, they're reducing, the attacks coming back. Psychic powers, and the shooting's better as well because they've got special rules for 1,000 Suns for that. And so and my Ursax moved up to be in a position to charge some stuff. And I'm like, actually, this game's going okay. We've got Magnus and the Arcus to come on now. Also, my Caslax are now kind of tied up, so they can't be shot. We'll see what he can do. I've got my big unit of 5 photon thrusters is like sitting in the middle of the table, just hoping no one fires at them. But they haven't been fired upon in the first turn. And unfortunately, at the start of his second turn, the problem with reserves comes up. Unless you've got reserve manipulation, how often do you not roll a 3+? Yeah, you have those days where you can't fail a 3+, and you have those days where you can't hit one. And Magnus didn't come down. And at that point with the scenario, we were quartered deployment zones. I was all in his grill. I had an Atropos with, had lost maybe 2 hull points, sitting like on the edge of his deployment, just in his deployment. His 2 units of Scarabs that were holding that kind of flank with had run off and weren't going to play much part in the game. His snipers were about to get charged by the Vorax. the Castellax were going to tie each other up. If the Arcus comes on and kills a unit, it's then going to die. And he, at that point, decided that he didn't really want to continue a game that was only ever going to go one way. And, that's different from the first opponent, but I've got no problem with that. I will always, if someone's expressing that sometimes you can even just see it in their face,
if the joy's gone out of it, then...
So, I've no problem with that. I would say, look, I'm happy to continue if you want. I'm happy to call it if you want, but up to you. It's not a problem to me either way. And so we called it. And that's a problem with reserves in this game. You take that risk for doing it.
Yeah, but that's a calculated risk there, isn't it?
It is.
You can use them to your tactical advantage. If your rolls don't come off, then that's good night Vienna.
And actually, on reflection, and it's one of those things. It's really easy to see in hindsight, isn't it? Had he started Magnus and the Arcus on the board, that Arcus has to die. And actually, I've got an Atropos that can do it and an Ordinator that can do it, my HQ. But the Photon Thrusters, which are the rest of my anti-armour, they need 6s to glance. So they're not, I got rerolls for Tank Hunters, but that's all those AP2 shots I'm not putting into the Terminators or the Castellax or what have you.
Yes.
So actually, even if it survives the Atropos shooting it, I've gone and shoot something else at it. That's, a portion of my fire it's absorbed that hasn't been applied to the units that I made run away. And Magnus is not going to go down straight away to this kind of stuff either. So he can be on the board and absorbing some of that, or part of a unit, which again then makes them fearless, that kind of thing. And on hindsight, actually doing that would have really severely limited the damage I can do. Yes, I can kill an Arcus in turn 1, but if you position it right and make it difficult, it costs me a lot to do it.
Well, you've got to think as well that I always think if you've got your big, in your list, you've got your big toys that are going to do your damage. Holding them in reserve is a gamble. You're cutting down their efficiency by not bringing them in early.
Yep.
And like you said, Magnus is not really going to go down in turn 1. So you're then also making your life difficult. Your opponent's making your life difficult because he's making you then make choices.
Yeah.
Like Magnus is there. Oh, that's there. Right, what am I doing? If you then do focus on killing the Arcos, then everything else has free reign to maximise their destructive capability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it does, it's those things sometimes. I'm keep it in reserve because you don't want it to get damaged, but then can really work against you if the rolls don't come.
And
off.
I don't know. Maybe I think his initial thought was he really needs that Arcus to do that job.
Possibly, yeah.
And to be honest, right at the start of the game, I was like, yeah, I'm with you on that. I was thinking, yeah, damn, he's left that off the board. That can come on anywhere along his whole table edge now, where it needs to, where it can be in cover, all that kind of jazz. It was only at the end of the game I was like, actually, yeah, putting it on the board creates problems, creates decisions that I have to make. And you're right. And every turn you're not on the board, you're not killing stuff. And I do sometimes think, a lot of players, I'm not necessarily saying this guy, he's a great guy to play, I really enjoyed the game actually. I think sometimes people are scared of stuff dying. And like, this is heresy. Yeah. Stuff dies. Yeah. Even if the tough to kill stuff can die, but my Atropos, I know, I've had it happen in other games with the Knights. Sometimes you don't make any saves and it just disintegrates in front of your eyes and you're like, that's 400 odd points I've just lost there. So, with particularly things like the Atropos, I'm used to now just chucking it up the table and going, well, if it's going to die, it's going to die up there. And just, at least that way, if it does die, I've controlled where it dies. And if they shoot loads of guns at that, they're not shooting my other troops. And if they're not, you give these decisions to make. So yeah, that was an interesting one. But it was a shame we didn't have more of a game of it. And at this point, I'm sitting there thinking, I've effectively played 4 games out of 12, ish on my first 2 games. Because even though we finished that first one with the Alpha Legion, it was not, the game was over at that point. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think at this point, Graham and that had a little bit of a look at my army. And I'm like, okay, right, yeah, whatever. But going into the third game, I actually elected to play one of the harder lists of the enemy, which was Dave Simpson's. What did he have? He had Death Guard with a couple of knights and attachment. He had an Atropos, a Seneschal, and he had a Spartan. He had a Sicaran. There were units in Rhinos, and it was like, okay,
right.
This is. I looked at the scenario though, because we knew the scenarios beforehand, and this was the ambush one, which a lot of people don't like. The big thing about this event, this scenario, was that we knew that the loyalists could choose. We're choosing first, so I could choose my deployment zone and be going first. I think that's a little bit of an issue. I think on that scenario, when you've got that double choice, you can choose to split your forces and come in at once, or you can choose to stay in the middle and expand at once. I think that's a little bit, you can look at that whole thing and make this scenario very difficult for your opponent. So it's Dave though, so that's fine. So I let him go in the middle. Oh, we were also deploying, with the one where you deploy by unit type. So individual models or units going down. So it wasn't like I deploy my whole force, then he can counter it. It was, we each deploy a Lord of War. We each deploy a heavy, so I could actually see a little bit of where he's deploying as well, which compounded that whole thing that I know I'm going first. So it's not much. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so.
So
yeah.
if I was putting my whole army down, then he can deploy to nullify my deployment. But with that deployment type, it's a lot harder to do that. And all I knew was my big anti-tank gun, so my Atropos has to go one side, and my Magus Lord has to either go on another side or a very different angle, so I can force his knights to choose where they want their shield. Basically to give him no good options. That kind of thing makes a difference. I mean, I could have done it, but he could have, chosen to, to target specific models easier. The only panic with this one, I think he was trying to roll the ICs on a 5-up, which that deployment zone in the center of that scenario is quite big. And if you deploy on the edge, if each player deploys on the edge of the deployment zone, you're only like 12 inches away from each other. Something like that. So it became one of those things where if I was going first, we were going to have a game, and I could potentially do a big amount of damage to him. If he was going to go first, then it's probably game over turn one, because he can specifically target, because my forces are split up, he's got much easier chance of targeting exactly what he needs to, and being out of range or line of sight of the others. But he didn't roll that, so like first turn, and it's first turn kill points as well. So I kill the Spartan, I kill the Sicaran, like the Atropos kills a Spartan, 6 Ursarax annihilate a Sicaran. I go and kill some rhinos, and actually a little bit of bad dice rolling. I didn't get to kill any of the stuff that came out of the rhinos or charge them or anything like that, but did, put a real crimp in his style on that kind of thing. And then he's chasing the game a little bit because his Terminators can come out. Fine, they charge the Atropos, and I think we were both sort of expecting one of those things where maybe not first turn, but I won't kill them all, and then second turn mutual destruction. But every now and then with a knight, you just roll a 6 on a stomp and you just destroy a whole unit. His Praetor made my Ursarax all run away. On the other side, the Atropos went and killed a unit, but my Atropos not dying meant next turn I can run into his baby knight. That took 2 rounds of combat before I killed his baby knight, which meant I couldn't be shot. Still left with a couple of hull points on that. I can charge his Atropos. We have an Atropos off. That was mutual destruction. And that was really game. my Atropos just ran through his army.
So that one sort of sounded a little bit more to and fro, that match. It sounded much more...
Certainly, this was, Dave's list was strong. I wouldn't say it was over the top, but you've got 2 knights in there, and they're household knights as well, so you can have the extra rules. Spartan with Terminators in can do a good job. He had a Typhon as well. That's a worry, because a direct hit from that can kill any of my squads pretty much, like 3 Thalax dead because it's strength 10. So there were issues.
He had a lot of super heavy in there then, really.
Yeah, he did.
Taking the Night House and then a super heavy as well. That's quite, and the
Spartans are mini,
are soft.
Spartans are mini super heavy by itself. So there was a lot, and this is where I mean that first turn he kills 1 unit of Thalax, he charges whatever he wants with his Atropos. His other knight can go in and shoot stuff up. He can assault me turn 1 out of his Spartan and kill, probably the Ursarax, maybe just go for the Atropos, but he can also put fire into it as well. All those little things I think would have meant I would have been very lucky to get away with a win. And as it was, I actually scored a big win against him. But Ambush is an interesting scenario, and I think it's one I would only ever use if it fit the narrative very specifically, and I would probably use it as a last game kind of thing. So last stand, or I just think there are issues with that scenario. There are, when you change around the setup of it as well, there are potential issues, and you try stuff, and I don't blame the guys for trying stuff. I've done it myself and got it very wrong as well. But if you've written something like, if the Loyalists have won all 4 of the first games, you can set up a thing where they've ambushed the enemy, because you know what? The traitors have lost every game. So here you go. Here's a really tough one. But give them some bonuses in that. But it's a good game. It was, this was one that happened. We had a bit of a break for tea, and came back to it. But it's good. Dave's army looks very good. And he's a good bloke to play. It takes his time, but he's a decent guy to play. So we had good fun, and we haven't played each other at any war game for probably 3 years, I think, even though we've been at many of the same events. So that was good fun.
So that one sounded a little bit more balanced, a little bit more.
It certainly was. I had to play. It's like, and that makes it sound like really egotistical. But the other games were over too quickly to be able to play the game. You set your plan up.
And if it's too one-sided, I find that neither person gets much out of that either.
Yeah,
if you do play a game and by turn 2 it's sort of come to a conclusion, you haven't feel as though you've played much of a game. Neither has the other person.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'd use the same list in this one. I like that 5 photon thruster unit. It's a lot of points. Maybe didn't get targeted as much as it needed. Dave knew it was a problem and targeted them. I made a few saves, which helped. But yeah, it was a good game, and it pushed you, which all led into day 2. So day 2, I got to play. I was now proclaimed to be on the naughty list, as it was called. And, whether that was a statement on my army, or whether the fact that I just won 3 games quite convincingly, I don't really know, but I was put on the naughty list, and I'm sitting there thinking, my list isn't that, it has strengths, it has weaknesses. And I was actually privy to a little bit of the conversation of who they were going to put up against me in this one. And, the guy put his hand up and said, I'll play him. I can deal with Mechanicum. And I don't know if he'd read my list, because I think he was expecting more robots than there were. But it was another Magnus list. Big unit of Sekhmet. To be fair, he took Tartarus on these guys with the +1, so, not the full 3-up save. But he had, I'm trying to remember what he had now, blimey. There was the scouts again, the special Thousand Sons scouts. And we had some troops running forwards, and I was looking at this game, Magnus, and this was Magnus with possible strength D shooting. So I was like, this is a very different Magnus to the Biomancy one that was there. I was like worried about that one getting into combat. I'm worried about what this one can do on his way in. And he had a an Arcus again, but it didn't have all the ammo. A few other bits dotted around, and I was like, this could be interesting. And sure enough, he moved forwards, and some strength D shots started coming at me, and I'm like, I don't know if I like this. Luckily,
they don't like it up 'em.
No, my Atropos is stood there kind of like, we're just going to have to run it forwards. Survived a bit of shooting. There's always a bit of cover. He's got a good save on the Atropos. Okay, no worries. And Magnus has come forward again, and my weight of sheer AP2 shots just starts bringing down those Sekhmet again. Yeah, and that's why I like them, because actually quite a few people do bring Terminators. And they can, at a pinch, deal with vehicles as well. And I'm like, okay, so they, just start taking down these Sekhmet, a wound on a character here and there in the unit as he's failing, look out, sirs. And then, once they whittle down enough, the Atropos goes in. I think it went into just Magnus and his Praetor. And I was like, okay, well, we'll hold Magnus up, hopefully, for a turn or two, but Magnus might just destroy it. Sure enough, the first stomp roll, 6. Magnus dead.
Oh.
Yeah, and again, it took all my shooting to take these Terminators down on the other side. I was losing some models here and there. I've got a lot of range in that army. The Caslax, I was losing, I lost, a couple of Caslax. There was some stuff going on. But the worry wasn't.
What's his list? And I call this, I've got a friend that plays the list. Was it an eggs in all basket in one basket list? Was it that the Sekhmet was with Magnus, with everything else that was there were the only thing you had to worry about?
It wasn't the only thing.
That unit.
It wasn't the only thing, but it was 2 characters, Magnus and a large unit Sekhmet. And Magnus being able to shoot out of that with high strength. And the beauty of Psychic means you don't have to shoot the target you're assaulting. So there's there was a fair amount of egg basketness going on.
Because I find that is, people talk about Magnus and the Sekhmet and how, but then I think if you're giving someone one target that you're effectively saying, try and stop me, there are a lot of ways of stopping it. Like you said, you whittle it away with loads of AP2 shots, and suddenly all those Terminators start melting, and then the big hammer that you think is going to come and hit you to get slowly weaker and weaker and weaker. Yeah, it can be very hit and miss. It can become a more of a rock paper scissors game. And I'm not sure he read my army, or maybe he understood it, because not everyone still played a lot of Mechanicum. But if you look through my list and just read how many photon thrusters there are, you can see that the 3 Thalax squads are putting 6 AP2 shots into you. The Darkfire Lance is another 2. The Myrmidon Destructors are putting 10 shots into you. It's like, just keep rolling dice. Just keep rolling dice. So, I think if I was looking at that, deciding who I wanted to play, I would look at, from his point of view, what's in this Mechanicum list? Oh yeah, no, I don't want to face that. Not because you can't beat it, but because it has an answer to exactly what you're doing. Yes. Completely.
So that's an interest. So again, that game, it went on, but.
So by now, are you on the double naughty list?
Oh, well, yeah, essentially, yes. And it's unfortunate.
So by now they're going, right, Greg Dan, he's gamey, he's got the nastiest list here.
To be fair, I will say, to be fair to the guy, there was second psychic phase. I don't think he got I think he got 1 psychic power off with like 16 dice.
Wow.
And I don't know. It's interesting. Everyone has their own views on how to do psychic powers, where you're rewarding your rolls. And Magnus is, only needs 3s, and he's boosting all of his big damage dealing psychic powers. And needing 3 successes, the guy was picking 4 dice to do it. And I was talking to Dan, I was like, how many dice would you use if you need 3 successes on 3s? And he's like, 6. And I'm like, I was thinking 5 minimum, maybe 6. And this guy was going for just over what he needs. And, most of the time that still works. But when you've got such psychic superiority and there's 1 or 2 things you need to get off, because the big one he missed was, immune to instant death on that unit. if I don't roll a 6 with the Atropos with the stomp, it doesn't happen. A lot of the time it doesn't happen. It means he's getting a feel no pain against all my AP2 shots, right? A 4 up.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So all of a sudden you just got so many more wounds to get through. That kind of thing makes a big difference, I think that was the one mistake he really made, was like, no, just make sure you get that one spell off. Because Magnus, he's never going to, he basically ignores the first miscast anyway. He needs 360s to do it, and then he pretty much ignores it. So it's like, risk it with that one. Maybe you don't risk it with everyone, but risk it with that one. And he just had one of those games where, oh look, there's 3 2s out of 4 dice,
Yeah.
So that played a part, I will say that. But it was a good fun game, and we played, and unfortunately it was just kind of overturned too when I stood on Magnus's head. And again, that's what happens with an expensive model.
That was quite unlucky, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it happens.
It does happen, and let's face it, we often talk about Primarchs and things, but you rolling a 6 on a D table, it doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, ouch.
And it depends how you want to play the game. If you want to be really kind of competitive, not competitive, but if you really want to play the game and try and make sure that you don't allow the opportunity to happen. Yeah, that's how can I guarantee that Magnus doesn't get D'd out by a combat attack? Well, make sure he can't get into combat. But that's not how everyone wants to play the game either. So there's a bit of a disparity sometimes with that. I'm not saying there was in this one, but yeah, we had a fun game. So yes, on the double naughty list, along with Joe. So Joe had been playing Traitors with he'd been playing with his Warhound. And again,
how they're rolling the Hydra Club.
I talked to him on the Thursday night, and I said, the following Thursday night, I said, so how many people were shooting your actual human troops? He said, well, not a lot. I said, were people trying to take your Arvus Lighters down? He said, yeah, people kept concentrating on them. So we played the game, and this is the mission with control thirds of the table, so no man's land and the 2 deployment zones. And I'm like, okay, Warhound, that's tricky. I've just got to go for it. And Joe unfortunately got the first turn, put a bit of damage out, and then second turn just, strength D on my Atropos, boom, do enough wounds to wipe that out, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Okay, cool. Take that off. But luckily my Ursarax were within a 9-inch charge and just narrowly made it and destroyed his Warhound in that second turn as well. But I'm sitting there thinking, okay, but I needed that more than you needed to kill my Atropos,
What did he have on his Warhound? Sorry, I don't know.
I can't remember exactly. He had the turbo lasers and the I can never remember the names of them now.
The
plasma. I think, yeah, plasma. So he's putting out some good shots. But apart from that, I deployed out of range of his artillery pieces, so they weren't doing anything like first turn. Second turn, as I moved my Caslax up into terrain, they were firing, but I'm getting I also had +1 to cover saves in ruins, so I had 3 up cover save from them. And, they're strength 10, yeah, I'm toughness 7, but you're only doing 1 wound when you get through. So, minimal kind of going on there, just trying to keep everything out of range. And his list had a few troops and then these 6 Arvus Lighters. Now, I don't know if you've seen Arvus Lighters, the rules, but...
They're pants.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
Oh, they're not?
I said, they're not cheap, they're like 100 points. But they're flying, and people think they're flying rhinos, but they've got 3 hull points. They ignore crews shaken and stunned on a 4 up, and they come with you can have a las cannon on each one. Alright, so, and they can carry up to 12 troops, I think. So all these lighters were coming on, and they're all firing las cannon shots into like whatever he needs to pick off. Which aren't the best, but they're good. And then he's dropping troops off as he needs to, but mainly keeping flying high. And I've got no Skyfire in my list at all. So I'm like, okay, well, this unit's got nothing else to shoot at. Let's shoot at one of them. Oh, got a couple of hits. Oh, I actually did 2 hull points to that. Is that destroyed? No, they've got 3 hull points. I'm like, what? Okay. that's a bit excessive. It's just still.
I suppose for a flyer as well, because hasn't the Xiphon only got 2?
Yeah, most of them have. Like a lot of them have. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. At least I've shaken you. No, I rolled a 4 up and ignored it. Okay, that's cool, awesome, right? But then I was sitting there thinking, actually, they don't matter. It's what's in them that matters. So my Castellax had moved up. My Ursarax had gone from killing his Warhound, been shot up, but charged another unit. He had 2 units that started on the table, and held them up long enough for the Castellax to eventually charge into 2 units and just sit there and just slowly pound on these 2 units. My other Castellax by himself, one of the units that came down out of an Arvus, charged them, and he's just sitting there with his 2 attacks a turn, pounding on them. One of his other units that dropped down just got fired by everything that could shoot it. And eventually my HQ made it all the way over there to charge them. And then another unit, I can't even remember what happened to that one, got shot up. And then he had 1 Arvus left, and last turn he's come in and dropped it in my deployment zone. And at this point, I mean, I got extremely lucky. One of the units ran away from the Castellax, destroyed. The other 2 units that were fighting the 3 Castellax in the middle of the table that had been on the board had his general in one of them. He's got characters. He's keeping them all alive. Failed like a rerollable 10 leadership or 9 leadership test and ran away on the last turn. On his last turn, so couldn't rally. So they count as destroyed. And I'd had a little bit of bad luck. He'd had a little bit of bad luck, but I think I'd missed a charge a turn earlier, things like that. And then this one unit, I was like, right, well, let's try and make them run away as well. Came round, tried to do it, even charging Thalax in and everything, couldn't quite do it. And we looked at it at the end of the game, and it's like, oh, Joe, you've got this unit in my deployment zone. That's really harsh. You know, that's the one left, and your 2 have run away. I've had that bit of luck. Hold on, I've got 1 Thalax in there. So we're contesting. So we're contesting this one. There's no one left in the middle. The only units in your one are running away. You got Slay the Warlord. No, sorry, you got First Blood, and I got Slay the Warlord. So we come out the whole game 1-1. I think it was.
Blimey.
Yeah, but the key to that, and this is where this game was so much different than the rest of them for both me and Joe. I think to be fair, Joe played Ben Williams, who gave him a similar kind of task. But I was like, right, okay, his flyers don't mean anything. Yeah, they got flying las cannons, but actually I can't deal with them. Okay, but there's 10 guys over there that I need to kill to win this game. Let's focus on that.
Yeah, looking at what actually is going to get you the points.
What's the mission? What's the mission? And I was up against it. I deployed so his artillery batteries couldn't do the damage they need to do, because they would have wiped me out. The game would have been over quite quickly. It's not a great deployment thing. It really restricts what I can achieve in the game, but it's that or get them destroyed, you know? When one option is destruction, the other option is a poor position. You take the poor position, yeah? And then again, sometimes it's like, I really want to shoot at this, these heavy weapons I'm shooting, which are AP2, strength 6, blind, everything else. I really want to be shooting them at something worthwhile, but actually, I need to kill these 10 men, so I will fire them at these 10 men. Yeah? And it becomes that real kind of, you have to be really strict in what you're trying to achieve to do it.
You have to, it's easy to get carried away on just trying to blow things up. I find I've had a few games where I've been pulled out of position, so I've been like that sort of game where you've got to get into certain parts of the board, but then seeing a juicy target that's maybe pulls you away from that target. You think, no, I want to go and kill that land raider. You move your troops towards it because you want to go and smash it up with a chain fist or whatever it is. Then you realise at the end of the game, you've just pulled your scoring unit out of a scoring position to blow up that vehicle that maybe would have done nothing to you the following turn.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And it's
those little things that can sort of catch you out.
And again, that depends on how you want to play the game. And Joe's a player who enjoys the problems that playing a tough game throw up, and so am I. to a point. I enjoy the challenge of how do I deal with this? How do I get around the options that are thrown at me? So we actually both really kind of plugged each other on that. And, I was helped a little bit by the fact that he wasn't allowed. He had the extra scatter, but, so he was hitting half the time anyway. The shields on the Warhound Titan not coming back were fairly irrelevant because the Ursarax got in there and, ripped it apart. It was turn 2, 5 attacks each, with strength 10 power fists will tend to do that.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not bad. And that's why if you're ever facing Ursarax, you want to shoot a few before they can get in there. But it's important if you're playing that kind of game that you do concentrate. And it was a good game. It was a very different game, but with no Skyfire in my list, I'm really restricted on what I can do. Now we've been talking to Joe about how maybe he can change the list up. He actually said he found the list to be a little bit dull for him to play, which is fair enough. I think it was a strong list. I don't think it was as strong as it looked. But if you didn't have the tools to deal with it, so if my Ursarax had failed that charge.
Flyers can do that. Flyers can, if you've
and the
got
Warhound can
lots of flyers, not everyone goes in for Skyfire, and if you have got lots of flyers, then suddenly, even if you've got one unit that can Skyfire,
it was an event.
That unit's gone, and what do you do?
It was an event of flyers. There was a Thunderhawk, there were lightnings, and Dave had a lightning as well. There was Joe had the 6. There were other tables with flyers all over the shop. Yeah, there were quite a few. But it's cool. And overall, the event, we played our games. The result happened, and I think everyone pretty much enjoyed all their games. There was that kind of feel to it. Everyone came away from it kind of, that was cool. That was cool. People coming away with it enthused to talk about lists and what they were bringing. Tom Sargent from Eastbourne, he came up with us and had 4 knights in his list because he had a load of stuff on order that didn't make it in time, so he had to kind of switch his list around a bit. I think he lost most of his knights every game, if not all of them. Mainly his knights were dying. I think he won a couple of games. But I know that our car journey home and our talks on our WhatsApp chat have been about people making different lists. What am I going to bring? And Dan was considering switching up army, but I think he's now just going to expand his Sons of Horus into a different way, or maybe look at some allies. And yeah, that was really cool. But it was an interesting event. I think the guys ran it pretty well. The using the hex tiles was an interesting method there.
Did they do that last time, or was that a new addition?
That was new. They kind of had this sort of choose where you're fighting thing last time, but it wasn't quite so. Didn't matter quite as much. Your choices were a bit more random, should I say. There were a couple of issues with it that I had, and I think they were aware of them to start with. So we had these 2 lists of naughty lists or harder lists, or however we want to describe it, more challenging. And they had to be designated attackers so that the enemy could put whoever they wanted to up against them. Unfortunately, because both sets of hard lists were dedicated attackers, that meant there was no way they could play against each other. So,
yes. Yeah, I'm with you, yeah.
So they certainly changed that to say the last game, me versus Joe, was you're playing Joe. And I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. So they certainly did it for that. I don't know if they did it again through the event. But if you've got, I think they had 3 traitor ones and 2 loyalist ones at the start. But if say you've got 3 and 3, that could form most of those games that those guys are going to play if they really are that much stronger than the other lists there. So you can just match them up with them. At least 2 or 3 games can come out of those pairings.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's tricky, isn't it? Because what was being said after you sort of drawn that last game? Were there accusations being thrown about? Were you being said that you'd taken a really hard list, or was it just a case of
Okay.
Saying, well, I've got quite lucky there.
First off, the term whackusation is not going to be used on this podcast, and that's not. I've chatted with this with Tom actually. It's nothing against kind of that attitude of fun whackusation. It's very easy for people to misinterpret what you're saying with things like that. And it's very easy for people to pick up and say, oh yeah, you're just a whack, you're bringing a whack list and whatever. And it's like, hold on, there are 4 or 5 different aspects of this game you need to look at to determine how good or how bad that list is. And I give my Mechanicum list to another couple of players there, and it doesn't fit their style, and they don't play it well, and they lose their games. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I just want to say, and that's
depend on the player.
Yeah, and this is an explanation for the listeners. It's not. I actually had a chat with a few people. I don't think it's necessarily a healthy thing to do for the hobby environment. And there's chats that have come out of some events where people have acted trying to call people out for how strong their lists are, and that's not something I think is healthy, because we all play in different environments where different strengths are seen to be the norm. Also, who's to say that we don't have an event where everyone just goes, yeah, still a narrative event, but bring what you got, do it. Because, sometimes they're the fun things you want to use. And also, armies get tarred with a brush, so things like Custodes. There was no single Custodes army there. There was an army with allies with Custodes. But so I know that Dan was looking at purchasing a Custodes army. In fact, did purchase a lot of stuff for a Custodes army, and was put off playing it because he didn't want to set his models up on the table and have an opponent go, oh my God, you're playing Custodes. Yeah? Without even looking at the army. And that is something that's happened in the hobby, and it's not healthy. And actually, I think at this weekend, in general, people were fairly good in that respect. I think Joe got a few kind of like, oh, you bought that, have you? And we certainly gave, people get ribbing for it. And there were a few people giving me ribbing for my list. And fair enough. Cool. But if you chose the right armies against it, you'd rinse it. But they didn't.
And I think that says a lot, though, about how people are currently writing lists. Because I think your list comes out a little bit where it catches people out.
Yeah, it's different. Very different.
Use Mechanicum, and it plays differently to how they're used to fighting other opponents, and then suddenly they don't quite know what to do against it.
I certainly think had I played Dave in a kind of straight on, long table length edge to long table edge, what survives can score the points, I think I probably would have lost. He has too many targets that I need to take down, and my weapons aren't quite good enough to do it in time. It would be a real struggle for me to get out of that game winning. Maybe I could do it, maybe not. And certainly that scenario gave me an opportunity where I think I can take Dave in this one. Give it to me. Let's see how it goes. But yeah, if
the narrative in some ways actually played into your hands, and you were winning narrative on a narrative basis rather than the list basis.
Yeah, and I'm not a bad player. I'm not the greatest player that's ever lived, but I'm not a bad player. And also, we had a mix there of players who play a lot of Heresy, who, enjoy the challenge of miniature wargaming and everything that throws up. So myself, Joe, Ben, particularly, is a guy who does that. And then we have players who, it's a sliding scale, isn't it? Players who are slightly below that, maybe, who do enjoy it, but maybe aren't. I'm an ex-Warhammer tournament player, or current Age of Sigmar tournament player, and I don't necessarily play hardcore at that now, trying to win events, but I used to. I will still play hard. I always believe in playing hard. Particularly in a competitive environment, you always play hard, whether you bring a hard list or not. You play fair, but you play to win. And there are people who were bringing, Tom Stallard's list was strong. Again, had the ways to play around it and had very strong weaknesses. I don't think we saw, I think it might have been one armoured breakthrough list there. You know, that's something you normally see one or two of them at that kind of event. Could have caused some of those armies big problems. But you've got a mix of lists and then a mix of players. And some of those people were bringing, so at least one of those Magnus's lists was a guy who was like, this is the way I want to play the army. I want to, I want to push models forwards and do this and do a bit of my psychic and whatever. And it wasn't necessarily, it was very, it's hard to choose a word. A lot of these words have been tainted. So if I say a club player, that's not a derogatory term. That is someone who wants to go out, have fun, roll some dice, enjoy the game, try and win, but is not worried if they don't win and wants to play to the theme that they've chosen for their army. That's a very positive term. But if you turn around and say, oh yeah, I played a club player. Oh right, yeah, you smashed him. Because that's how people see it, like ability or whatever. It's not always the case, is it? It's like, no, I just don't want that. And I've had games where I've done that. I'm like, you know what, mate? Just going to push these models forwards and see what happens. And your World Eaters players are always a good example of this. So you can almost always bait a World Eaters player to charge you, whether it's the right thing for them to do or not. Because all you need to do, like Duncan Cormack, right? He's a good player. He's a decent player. He writes some decent lists and, doesn't try and write the list that will win everything. But if you give his Praetor unit, a unit with his Praetor in and whatever, a charge, chances are he's going to take it because he's a World Eaters player. That doesn't mean that he thinks that's the best option all the time, but that's the option he wants to take as a World Eaters player. They are, as we said before, they're the Orc players of 30k. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. And this is why I've seen some people talk about different ways of setting players up against each other. I think we have to accept that there is no perfect system at all, and there never will be. Whether you've got players who approach the game in slightly different styles or don't want to give up certain aspects of their way they play or the army they play because of, I want to use whoever because he's the coolest person in the books. Whether he's any good in the game or not, I want to use him. You're always handicapping yourself if you're coming up against someone who's like, well, the whole point of the Emperor's Children is they're tactically supreme, so I'm going to try and do this, this, and this all at once.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's, I say that's a conversation that I want to try and kind of break down a little bit as well. I think it's really hard with the Heresy. There were very few kind of the traditional Spartan, Primarch, Terminator squads. There were variations on that. But whenever someone comes new into the Heresy, maybe from reading the books and playing 40k and reading the books, one of the first things you want to do, whether you do it or not, is kind of go, I want my Primarch in a Spartan with some Terminators, because I've read about that loads of times. And
it's a very easy list to formulate.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because you go, I really want a Primarch because that's what I've been reading about.
Then sure
what should I
enough,
put them in? A Spartan's a really good vehicle they can go in.
Yeah.
Do you know what? A Terminator bodyguard, it writes itself.
All you have to do is say, I want to carry more than 10 models in a tank. Yeah. Which tank is available to me? It's a Spartan. Yeah? So you become limited in choice because of that. And then almost any experienced player who has a little bit of kind of tactical sense or tactical desirability of their army will go, oh yeah, I know how to take out a Spartan. I've prepared for that. And that's not them being brilliant. It's not the other person being rubbish. It's just the state of the game. But yeah, that's a whole different thing. At the end of the day, there were, 32 players there. Everyone mixed in with each other. We were all, I stayed up till 3:30 with Tom and Dan and a few others, Keith talking rubbish as usual, that kind of thing. Saturday was a little bit more sensible bedtime. Everyone was getting upset because they were waiting for their Parmos. Played some Shadespire on the Saturday night with some people, met some of the other podcasters I hadn't really met yet. Everyone seemed to be having a very good time, all getting on, playing some Warhammer, rolling some dice. As far as I'm concerned, if an event does that and everyone has fun, then you've got a successful event there. The narrative was good. It all played together. I think once they do the second event, they're going to release the narrative, but because they're doing the second event, obviously, they don't want to spoil it for anyone playing in that, which is sensible.
Yeah.
There was a lot of good stuff that came out of it. A few maybe learning points. I think where we're looking at when you've got 32 players, the one thing that the guys do a fair amount between game because they're sorting out results, they're working out which of the threads they then need to pull out, print off, talk through. They then need to organise who's playing whom in the games and then get that all ready to put it up. I do think there's a possibility somewhere. Maybe they haven't got the manpower because of everything else they're doing. But to look at the individual games and say, actually, we've put Joe up against this guy's decided to play him. He's going to get smashed just because of list imbalance or, list kind of rock, paper, scissors of this list. Let's give player B, who's playing Joe, some extra rules to help him. That's maybe one thing where they could improve. And that's a minor thing. And I have the issue of we're looking at London Heresy, over 80 people. To look through all those games and do that will be tricky.
Yes, yeah.
But the
numbers are always there.
Yeah. So I can come up with the general thing to maybe hit X armies that are outperforming or struggling. Maybe I can do that. But actually, if at the end of the day, both players walk away from that table having had fun, having felt they've engaged in a battle, then does it matter? Just long as at the end, you can't guarantee an even battle in the Heresy, particularly. No matter how many people say that this game is much more balanced than 40k was, it's still unbalanced. Really unbalanced in certain aspects. And it always will be. And that's fine. That's cool. No worries. But accept it. And we had people there who didn't moan about, I didn't hear it anyway. You didn't hear, maybe they were all moaning about me behind my back. I don't know. But you didn't,
that's what was happening.
But you didn't hear people coming away from the table going, oh, why is that allowed? Why is this allowed? And all that. Oh, he just rolled me over. Because again, sometimes that's like, well, what did you do to stop him? All that kind of stuff. Everyone was just like, cool, yeah, I played a good game. Oh yeah, our game wasn't that brilliant, but we had good fun while we did it. That kind of thing. Yeah. And then the long drive home.
Yes, yeah. So that was obviously the tiring bit of it all.
Yeah, well, yes, not the staying up late and the chatting and eating rubbish and, too many sweets and things like that. But it's a cracking event. If you can get that, I can see every Company of Legends event is going to be a quick sellout. It's something I will try and get up to one of them every year because I really love it. It's great to go that far north and meet different people. Some of the guys from Scotland come down for it, things like that. It's, they say they sold out quick and sold extra tickets fairly quickly as well. Don't know if they've got any tickets left for their September event, but if you are interested, then you maybe contact them and get on a reserves list because there's always someone who drops out of these things. But Graham, Michael and Chris are cracking guys, and the girls who did all the food were great as well. And those guys, Michael came and helped out at Blood and Glory. He's going to come out and help at London Heresy as well. And in their podcast, if you haven't listened to Age of Empire, it's family friendly and it's cool. It's good. It's, three friendly voices chatting away, and they're looking at ways of kind of reaching into areas that maybe other people don't hit so much. But, really good. Really good. I'll be heading up there again. You'll have to try and come up next year.
Yeah. I've made a thing that I want to try and get to Adepticon.
Oh, next year?
Next year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We'll have to have a little chat after this because I'm on honeymoon in January, I think. But, Adepticon may have to happen as well. May. But we'll see.
That's the plan anyway. Yeah. So dates willing, and obviously getting the passes all signed off by
who needs, as I said,
is the bigger problem.
As I said on the tweet, who needs Adepticon when you could be in a scout hut in the outskirts of Durham?
Yes.
You know, it's just, you know, it's not quite the same. Adepticon with all its thousands of gamers. It doesn't matter where you are at the end of the day. If you're out there with groups of people having fun, you want to experience different things. But yeah, no, it's a really good event. Awesome. That was a waffle and a half.
It was, yeah.
If anyone's got any questions about it, feel free to send them in. As I say, other podcasts will be covering it as well. You know,
if you play Greg and feel cheated, please email us.
Don't, Joe. Joe will message in. If you ever listen to the show. You know, but if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. But we'll leave that there. We'll come back and we'll talk with Michael. Okay, we're back with Michael. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks.
Good stuff. So this is going to be a first in what we're hoping to do with the show is a few more like traditional reviews, I suppose you would call it, the kind of thing you do on your website.
Yeah.
And the kind of thing you'd find in a magazine or what have you, where a book is about to be released and you get an overview of it and opinions on from those who've read it. The first one we're going to do is Wolfsbane. Now, this was available at the Heresy Weekender, so we were able to pick it up then, although its release date is, a little while away. May? I think it is.
Yeah, May, I think.
So we're a bit earlier than normal on this one, but this book is out there. So, and that's kind of one of the reasons for doing this. Is it's out there already. A lot of people are talking about it. So, but we're going to look at doing this a bit more often during the course of the shows, because it's probably got some value. You can let us know either way on that one. Now, Wolfsbane is a bit different because of this quite a large gap, actually. Didn't really expect, basically 3 months early. It's quite a long gap. And images from the inside of the book have made its way online, as they do, and have caused a little bit of a furore, and the actual concept of the book as well has caused a little bit of a furore. So we might actually just touch on a couple of bits a bit deeper than normally would with this one. So just be aware of that. If you're the kind of person who doesn't want to know anything, skip this section. If you do want to find out a little bit more, then feel free to stay with us. Overall, so Wolfsbane, what's the story, Mike?
So it's book 49 in the Horus Heresy series. Can you believe it?
Oh.
And it's interesting because it draws from or leads into a few things which are already out there. So it draws from Vengeful Spirit and from Chris Rake's novella Wolf King. And then, weirdly, this isn't the norm, but it ties into something that's already been released, which is Wergeld in Gav's Korax book. So this is the story of, essentially, Leman Russ taking it to Horus. So it's been talked about for quite a long time. There's this idea of it being the Wolf Cull. That people thought that was going to be the name of it. Because I think that had come up in a Forge World seminar. It's not quite as simple as that. It's Russ and the Wolves have been in the Sol system. So we saw that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we saw that at the end of the Wolf King. Is that right?
Yeah, we got the idea.
Yeah, so they essentially found their way back to Terra. And at this point, they've been on Terra for a while, or in the Sol system, kicking their heels. They've gone out, and fought some battles, taken a bit of damage. But Russ is really champing at the bit to not be sat waiting for Horus. And the remaining Primarchs who are around, especially Dawn, are keen on everyone remaining at Terra to provide as much strength as possible for when Horus arrives. But Russ, as Russ is wont to, he doesn't want to do that. And essentially, slightly spoilerific if you haven't read Ruinstorm, although it's fairly obvious what's going to happen, that Sanguinius and the Blood Angels arrive, and that essentially gives Russ license to say, right, you're here now, you guys can deal with this, I'm going to go and figure out what to do, how to take it to Horus. And I think that's about the premise, safe to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's a side story there of, people know Belisarius Caul's in this novel, of Belisarius Caul and his actions at this time, which actually do have an effect on what's going on, and obviously lead further.
So this is very much young Belisarius Caul, so it's not, he isn't already an established, what's his title? Archmagos Dominus or something like that. He's not high up in the priesthood. He's a youngster, relatively speaking, and he's in, I think it's the Trisolian system, and that's referred quite early on as being the gateway to Beta Garment. Yeah. So that's obviously some foreboding there of why it's relevant that he's in that particular place.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not, he takes up a sizable portion of the novel, I would say. It's not just a loose thread that's thrown in. It's
definitely, a subplot. Ultimately, the book is definitely about Russ. Russ is the heart and soul of it. And there are plenty of other characters who get some really interesting time in the limelight. But what Caul does is aside. It's for the most of the book set away from where the wolves are, and it's important. It's worth seeing both for his character and for events going on. But yeah, you're right. It's a subplot rather than being a main focus. But at the same time, it's not just a little throwaway. So if anyone's thinking, is this just an excuse to cram Caul into the Heresy? No. I don't think so.
Well, Guy's actually answered this a couple of places. Guy loves the character of Belisarius Caul. He finds him very intriguing. So he actually chose kind of to put him in there at that level. But the book would also, I think the book also needs that second plot point.
Yeah.
Away from the main thing, and if it wasn't Caul, it would be something else. So there are people who aren't happy with that aspect of it. Feels like it was very secondary, but I think any other story would be very secondary, and making the primary story longer would have felt like you were padding it out. It's the size it needs to be.
I completely agree. And I think in isolation, I can see how someone who hasn't read it might think that. But what it does as well, not just narratively, not just in terms of developing a character who is fundamentally quite important and quite interesting, what it does is slightly change the tone of the book. So it's quite a mystical sort of book. We'll come on to that in a bit more detail, I'm sure. But a lot of it is about the spirit of the Space Wolves and seeing a different aspect to what we'd really seen before. And these are not happy-go-lucky characters anymore. The wolves are hurting. They've been beaten down. They're not in a good place. And so Russ's sections and Bjorn and so on and so forth are quite dour. There's not a lot of light and humour in those. And what Caul does is inject a little bit of warmth, which is ironic given that he's a tech priest, but injects a little bit of humour and character into them. And he's got a wry sense of humour. There's some I found some genuinely sort of pretty much laugh out loud moments, and it just adds another texture to the book overall. So even if you're thinking, I'm not really interested in Caul, actually in contrast with what's going on elsewhere, it does help the book feel like a nice solid whole and something that isn't just too dark.
Yeah, and I feel so. This is a Caul. Yeah, so he's 100 million miles away from the Caul of 40k that Guy's written about. I think there are people out there with their prejudices against him, rightly or wrongly, and I don't think this book will win those people over. But if you're not bothered, I think it has the opportunity, and I find Caul an interesting character because it's another open space that can be explored in a period of time that we think we know about.
Yeah, for sure. And if you think about how the Heresy fits in with 40k, and as much as part of the joy of the Heresy is looking at either characters or legions or forces in a more naive time, before the real rot had set in, before the darkness had set in, and that means that there are characters who transcend the two settings, that we know have survived a long time, and that's really interesting to see them develop. Even if it's just seeing, we know what they're like in 40k, and here's what they were like then. There hasn't been a lot of that for the Mechanicum. How many named characters historically have there been in the Mechanicum other than people like Hellboy Hal?
Yeah, exactly.
Very few. So what Cole does is have that link into 40k that other elements of the Heresy have, and so you see him at a very different stage, and there's some really interesting stuff, some foreshadowing, but also I can't remember the specifics of it, but there's essentially a moment where he's looking at a superior and reflecting upon how far from the human template she's travelled and taken herself. And he's like, I'll never do that. I believe in the human form.
Yeah.
Ho, ho, ho. We know what he looks like in 40k. Guy's done a really good job, I think, of fleshing out extrapolating backwards what a call so many years in the past might have been like, and not making it a straight line.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's also given him when you break it down, there's a traditional hero's beginning there for Cool. In, was it Joseph Campbell, a hero of 1,000 faces or whatever it is, there's 7 archetypes. And Cool is that guy who fades into the background, but actually at the point that he has to stand up, at the point where someone pressures him on his beliefs, right, he turns out to be, I ain't taking no rubbish from anyone.
Yeah. And
stands up. And actually, I found that really cool. It was really good. And made me like Cool even more. So that's cool. But I think we covered that aspect of it. As I say, some people are just not going to like it on principle.
That's fair. It's important to mention him because he's an important part of the book, but we shouldn't focus on him to the exclusion of all else. Because what ultimately this book is about is about Lehman Russ and the Wolves trying to work out what their role is supposed to be. Dealing with the changes that they've had to go through. If you followed their arc, especially with things like Wolf King, you'll have seen, in a similar way to some of the other legions, we've seen how White Scar's changed. We've seen that the Wolves have been shaken. They know they've been manipulated. They know that they've taken a hammering. And so this is exploring a different side of their personality, but also exploring their relationship with what's happened, with how the fellow legions see them, with how Russ's brothers see him, and essentially with thinking, can we actually do the role that we choose to feel as ours anymore?
Yeah. Or again, that can be looked at different ways, definitely. And particularly dealing with this, so, Russ is targeting Horus's ship, as I say, you said it follows on from Vengeful Spirit in that aspect. So everything's lined up in place for Russ to go after Horus, and that's been lined up for however many books.
Yeah.
But we know, 99% of us know the ultimate end of the story. So we also know that there's got to be more to it. And it's very easy to come at it with, well, this better be good because, we know what's going to happen. And how do you portray that? And then how do you portray that without impinging on other characters' storylines and reducing the effect of Sanguinius' story, for instance? And I feel that's almost missing part of the story because it's almost like it's about the journey. It is about the journey they go on, the Space Wolves, in trying to do this. And Russ's feelings are way more nuanced than, so, I mean, I'm used to it now because of, as you said, because of Chris's and Dan's work, with the Space Wolves. I'm used to seeing them as being one of the most introspective legions there is.
Yeah, but, behind the facade, for sure.
But 10 years ago, it was all, we all thought that bravado was their nature and their nurture, their nature and their demeanour. Though they had no depth in that, but actually they're hugely deep. And they're not fools either. They know that they've set themselves a task which is all but impossible. But but the beauty in that is then how do they accept that challenge?
Yeah, for sure. And that, if anyone's listening to this thinking, remind me again how this fits into Vengeful Spirit, that reason of them thinking we probably can't do this is because, so in Vengeful Spirit, one of those subplots was Loken and a bunch more of the Knights Errant, made their way onto the Vengeful Spirit, and were marking their way through the corridors and all that sort of thing. And suffice to say, it didn't go very well. But you get the feeling that Russ sort of knew it wasn't going to go very well, but the full story, what's the character's name? Bro Turfinger? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. One of those Knights Errant. He's related the story of what happened to Russ. He's demonstrated the depths that Horus has sunk to and what he's become. And Russ is having to accept that, well, you know what? Maybe beforehand, I could have taken him. I could have done this and stopped it. And there's a really nice prologue which touches upon an early or the first meeting between Russ and Horus, and there's some nice little connections there. But by this point, Russ is going, yeah, I probably can't do it. So, what do we do? How do we find a way to, even if we can't win, to achieve some sort of victory? And so they go back to Fenris, and they tap into that spirituality that they have. That their psychers and what have you are much more spiritual leaders than purely psychers, purely librarians. So they tap into that. The Legion goes on a journey. Russ specifically goes on a journey to try and find some truths and understand what he can actually do to make a difference.
Absolutely. And yeah, all within the context of this job of executioner, whether it's appointed, whether it's now appointed because it's been believed, or whether they are actually the Emperor's executioners, whichever combination of the three, there's an expectation. And you're right. And at the start, yeah, well, maybe me versus Horus, who knows? Me versus Horus now, it's not looking good. But there's one thing that Leman Russ has never done, is never shirked his duty. Which makes for a really, interesting. It must have been quite difficult for Guy to kind of get his head round how he was going to do that. And we get this journey of self, should I say, as you say, back to Fenris. Freudian slip there. Go back, kill a few more thousand suns. It's fine. And on Fenris, as you say, that takes an even deeper toll, and you actually start to understand that there may be something more to the whole, the Space Wolves, the power from the warp being filtered through Fenris. They do things very differently than everyone else. And that's not like we're special. It is, there's something very different there. And we get, sorry, you gonna jump in?
No.
Okay, sorry. And we get a very interesting scene on Fenris, which is shown, if you've seen any of the photos that have been going around out of this book, there is a scene of Russ in a kind of long house with these Wolfen type creatures, and it's very heavy metal, and it's awesome. It's such a cool image.
It's labelled, it sounds a bit prog rock in the label. Yeah. It's Leman Russ howls for an audience in the hall of the Earl King. Definitely sounds like 70s prog rock.
Absolutely. And that caused utter amounts of confusion online, because all some rabid theories are coming up about the 13th Company, or who knows what else, all the individual kind of lost wolves on Fenris and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it's tied very much into this spiritual journey he has, and anyone who's got a vague inkling of some of the Norse myths, it's got like links to going into the underworld, and facing trials.
Exactly. And that's a theme that runs through so much, sort of global mythology, wherever you look, this idea of, being tested and challenges that you can't really win, but that serve a purpose.
Yeah. And
that's exactly what Russ is doing. Through, like you said, through that connection with Fenris, and the way that the psychers for the Space Wolves, that, like you said, they're not better. It's not something special. It's they take a different approach. and that approach is far more affected and determined by their close connection with where they're from. If you look at a lot of the other legions, they don't have such close connections with their homeworld. They'll often have behavioural connections, like the salamanders or like the Iron Hands, but the Fenris affects the Space Wolves in a slightly different way to most homeworlds and how they affect their legions. And I don't think that has to be, it's because Space Wolves are special. It's just different. And it would be boring if they all had a special connection. It's
essentially, it's so deeply in their culture as a legion is so deeply entrenched in Fenris that
and they refuse to give that up as well.
That it's their special thing more than anything else. That is their special thing, and that bleeds itself into other smaller things. So you can have your space vampires with your blood angels, and that's their special thing. But that's not relevant to where they come from, as you said. The Ultramarines could be on any of those 500 planets. And you're right. What do the Sons of Horus get? Their gang culture, but that's all they get really from theirs. So, you're right.
And I think one of the really interesting things that I thought about this stylistically is, so you've got that sense of mythology, you've got that sense of spirituality, and it's not. I'm not going to say it's all the way through, but I thought Guy took a slightly different approach with his language, that it feels a little bit poetic. It feels like it fits in with that sort of oral tradition of the Skjalds and that sort of thing that he doesn't normally do. And it was, whether it was conscious or otherwise, it felt like a noticeable stylistic choice.
Yeah, I can see it being conscious. It feels like a saga.
I suspect so, yeah.
3/4 of this book are a saga, and even the end is to a point. In fact, actually, it is quite a lot, but that the final part is very much more 40k world. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that idea of it being saga-like applies sort of pace-wise and structure-wise, because actually, you think, if you boil it down, this book is about Russ going and taking on Horus. But actually the fighting, the big scrap happens really right near the end, and is not the emphasis. The emphasis of the book, despite that being the tagline, the emphasis is about that journey. So it is, for a Heresy, well, no, not maybe, for a Black Library book, it is perhaps a little more measured, a little slower paced than a lot. There's plenty of stuff going on. You're not going to be sat there going, oh, come on, let's get to the fighting. But it's not balls to the wall action the whole way through, even for a Heresy book. And I think it's all a deliberate choice. It all reinforces that sense that this is like a saga, that this ties in, and it makes the book feel like a coherent whole, I think. And it means that you get really built up for that point where the sort of the saga bit, like the journey part of the saga ends, and you're like, right, now it's kicking in.
Yeah. And that bit in itself is very interesting. How do you approach these things? Yet another instance where we know the outcome because of Corax, because of the history of 40k. We know that the outcome is very, very limited. So how do you write that? Well, actually, what Guy's written has managed to make both Horus and Leman Russ come out of it very well, and also provide a whole host of what-if questions.
Yeah, a lot of the what-ifs. And I think one of the objectives was probably to demonstrate at least a little bit. It doesn't get inside Horus's head, but it demonstrates a little bit about where he's at. And I think if that's an obvious thing that it's going to do if you're showing Leman Russ, not physically changed at least, coming up against a massively changed, corrupted, developed Horus. You're gonna inevitably see through that lens a little bit of the power that Horus has accrued, and I suspect we'll see more of that in things like John's Slave to Darkness. But it was just a nice little touch of it, in amongst sort of everything else that was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of that, you can run with a number of what if scenarios,
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
just based on what happens in that fight, as in the immediacy of those two beings. But you can also actually project that forwards for Horus. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of things going around about the big fight with the Emperor might not be exactly how we remember it from other books. And, there's been
I would
more
love that to be the case, personally.
Yeah, we've already had, ever so slightly different versions of it anyway. But there is scope here to really dig into that in a very different way. And again, that's not a bad thing, because every other version of that we've had has been a history book version of that, which has been told down time. So it allows you to go, when we do get those final books, you don't know how that final fight is going to go down. You know the end result, but you don't know how that fight is going to go down anymore.
No, absolutely. And this is the same thing in Microcosm, isn't it? If you've read Wergeld, you will see what has happened to Leman Russ by the end. Even if you haven't, we know that he can't kill Horus, because Horus is there at the Siege of Terror. Like you say, fine. But you absolutely don't know how that plays out. You don't know what conversations can be. You don't know even if they're going to actually get to duke it out in the way you think they're going to. So there's a weird amount of blank canvas, surprisingly, all things considered. And I think the same thing will happen with the Emperor and Horus. We've seen Bill King's stories and those sort of things, and how they've been adapted for the Visions books. But they've only been one, like you say, historical perspective. And I think the same thing applies with Russ and Horus here. We know there's going to be a confrontation, but don't know anything about the specifics. And I don't want to give anything away, but there's some really interesting stuff that goes on with that. That ties into Russ's character, but also, like you say, foreshadows even more than just the similarities. It foreshadows the fight between the Emperor and Horus in terms of that personal relationship where two characters who were so close are in such interesting situations.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to add on the Wolfsbane before we?
Well, I just think it's a testament to Guy's writing. I think a lot of people give justifiable praise to Dan and Chris and people like that who have put a solid body of work into a single legion or chapter or army or whatever. The Guy's tended to write what he's needed to write, and so hasn't always got the credit for developing things and really adding layers onto characters or legions the way that some of the other authors have. But I think what he did here is take a huge amount of work that had already been done, and he could easily have just run with it and just delivered something the same. But I think this is a development upon what's already been done with the Space Wolves.
And the Sons of Horus.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's cracking. Really good. Really good.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see the reactions in general when it comes out in May. But I think people will enjoy this. I think there will be some surprises, but I think overall this will be seen as a positive.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I think we'll leave that one there then.
All right.
Excellent stuff. And we'll come back. We'll have you on again soon.
Sounds great.
Cheers. Well, you've made it to the end of another episode of the Imperial Truth. Neil, you discovered something on Instagram over the weeks.
Yes. Yeah. And it came out of the blue. I saw it. I thought it was a fantastic idea. So I instantly messaged you and said, "Oh, look at this. You've got to, we should talk about this." So I follow a guy on Instagram called Taro Model Maker, I think his Instagram handle is. Hold on,
cool.
Man looks things up on internet. Hold on.
It's
yeah,
amazing,
Taro Model Maker. So he makes a lot of kits. He's actually a model maker by trade. He makes some of the third-party kits and bits and pieces. So follow him. He does put up some really cool bits and bobs up on his feed. And it was a few days ago, he just put up a post saying, I'm late to the party on this, but, I think this is a really good idea. And he's basically bought these aqua brushes, which are sort of watercolor. I think they're for watercolors, and you can obviously fill them with a pigment, and you use them for painting without having to refill your brush. So it's got a brush tip on the end and like a tank at the back. Now what he's done is taken the GW washes, put that inside, and has turned it into a sort of formulated wash pen, effectively. So if you were painting an army and you had, one of your steps was to put wash in all the recesses of your vehicle or all over these models, you can have it preloaded and literally just sit there constantly going round without the need of like in and out of pots with brushes, the risks of knocking over wash pots, which we all know is a deadly risk with GW. And I thought it was such a good idea. I wanted to tell everyone about it, and I instantly ordered some of the pens off Amazon as soon as I saw it. I think it cost me £4 for 4 pens, so it's pretty inexpensive. And then fill them up with washes, and away you go. So I'm going to be doing that hopefully on my next army project. So it's not possibly a technique you would use for Golden Demon or anything like that, because you obviously want as much control as possible if you're painting something to a high standard. But certainly for, if you've got a ton of models that need lining or, applying washes, I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. It's something I'm keen to get on and try out, actually. Do they come in different sizes? Sorry.
Yeah, well, the pack I bought was a 4-pack, and they have 4 aqua brushes, and there's a small, medium, large, and then a medium that's like a flat nib.
Right.
So, I've got four sizes, and I mean, to be fair, I think really I'm probably going to at most have I'll get my words out. Agrax Earthshade and Null Oil will be my 2. So I'll probably put one of those in a small, one of those in a medium, and then the flat one, I don't know, if you're doing terrain or something, or it's a big tank, it could be useful if you had to apply it to a large area. But I think for what it costs, it's worth picking them up and just giving it a go, and hopefully I'll be giving them a go fairly soon, and we'll see where we go from there. But
yeah, he's got a cool
idea.
Yeah, he's got a video of him painting some Necron bits, and it applies over the model, but it definitely recesses in those. It sits in those recesses very easily. You can go. So if you go and find this guy and find the post, there's a lot of comments on it. A lot of people asking questions. One guy's saying they'd already used them and they can clog up a little bit. So maybe you need to play around with just thinning it down a little bit, maybe some Lamy and medium, something like, flow improver in there, something like that. But yeah, as a tool, it looks to have certainly, an ability to get you, I say, to point A a lot quicker if you can make it work for you.
I think it's one of those things, if you were doing an army and you had, a ton of troops or a ton of vehicles in front of you, and you thought, I've got to put this wash all over all these areas, that's a massive time saver. You could save an hour or 2 in just that sort of that backwards and forwards process of brush to palette, brush to pot to palette to model.
Absolutely.
You're literally just getting that pen and just going blah, 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 all the way over them all. You probably do it in a quarter of the time.
Yeah, and it also, it might be a case that it depends how well they store like that, because if they dry up at all. So, but if you can potentially keep, as you said, so an Agrax, a Devlin Mud, a Null Oil, and I like the idea of the Null Oil, the gloss matte mixes. If you've got, say, 4 brushes out ready, Flesh Shade's another one that gets used a lot, and you can literally just go, okay, I've got 10 heads to do, rather than reaching in, getting the pot out, making space on your wet palette, finding a new bit to do them on. You can literally just pick that up, have a little play, and then go. It's going to be a lot less fuss. It's cool.
Yeah. I just thought it was such a clever idea, and I think I sent him a message saying, give it 6 months, you'll see Citadel pens, like, preloaded with wash.
Yeah, maybe. I say it all depends whether they can be stored that way, which I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I haven't kind of read up yet. There might be issues with storing the paint in them on the brush, but
yeah, I just thought, and they're synthetic, so you're not going to be getting
sure
the finest points and control.
But then it's not a system that you'd probably use for fine control, is it? If you're going to paint competition painting,
it's getting that. I mean, I think the washes, when they first brought out washes, I thought, that they were like, oh wow, this is a great thing. These are great, going to save everyone so much time and effort. This is just a time saver, isn't it? It's just a We're only talking about
do a
that
2-inch
bit of extra effort you don't have to put in.
Do they do a 2-inch wide brush? That's the next question. They'll do the whole model at once.
Yes, yeah.
No, that's very cool. There's some potential in that, and I'm going to have to get them once we, kind of put some of my sales on hold, as I say, until we're moved in and I can set up properly, and then I might have to buy a few of them and see how they work out.
But I think the cost as well, the fact that they cost, you pick 4 of them up for £4. You're not going out and buying an airbrush and investing lots of money into something that you may not get any use out of. I think it's going to be quite easy to even get a little bit of benefit out of it.
I'm going to brand up some work game shop ones. They're going to be £12 each. All black, sleek, designed. It'll be fine. No, it's all good. It's all good. So, you got any feedback on the show? And then, please, or in fact, I tell you what, if you've used these and you've got any, you can answer our questions on them. Let us know. Greg at theimperialtruth.com or
Neil at theimperialtruth.com.
Yeah, or you can get us on Twitter. So at Child of Fang or at Imperial_Truth for the show.
Yeah, I'm at Neil Paints on virtually everything.
So that's Twitter and Instagram and everything else. And at Child of Fang on Instagram. Been a bit slower on Instagram again. Got to get back on that one, I feel. But
I've tried to do a bit more on Instagram.
Yeah, I see you putting a leg up.
Some weeks it's tricky.
Yeah, it is.
I feel bad though when it's the same leg.
I feel bad when it's not Heresy, even though my Instagram's for everything. But I'll try and get some photos up. You can and feel free to feedback on the show as well. And if you like the show, don't forget you can leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to. iTunes being one of the classics, so give us a rating and leave a review on iTunes. That's always helpful for us. Tell your friends that you listen. Sometimes you'll be amazed. We say quite often, you'll be amazed at how many people don't really realise that podcasts are a thing, and that there's much enjoyment to be had. Maybe not from this one, but certainly from some others. And for all those who really super want to help, then you have the Patreon. So you can head over to Patreon, search for The Imperial Truth, and you can support our endeavours here with a little bit of a tip for putting out the show. And our winner of the first Patreon competition, I've got to send he finally got hold of us. What I like to do with the competitions, I like to let people listen to their name come out, find out that way first. So I always leave a bit of time, and then after a while I will contact someone and say, "Oh, you won." So it was nice to see an email from him and from the gentleman who won the lamp as well, and to see it.
Yes, that was quite funny because he messaged me and I thought, oh right, so you're the only way, because I didn't announce it, I just allowed him to hear it on the show. So that's quite cool. I think it's a cool way of finding out.
Yeah, absolutely, and to send us a picture of it all set up as well, which is quite cool, and hopefully that does him wonders, because we can always use a little help with our hobby areas, can't we?
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. And I think we're pretty much there at the end of the show. Is there anything you would like to shout out, Neil?
No, nothing more from me.
Awesome. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.